that's probably the only way to get a loving relationship, by being hurt and allowing yourself to be hurt. Whereas when the guards start to go up, not even the nice guys are going to get through.
Welcome back to another episode of Love or Lie Island, where we're joined by the wonderful body language expert Judy James, because this year's Islanders might be telling us one thing, but their body language is definitely saying something else. We're in week 2 now, Judy. It's kind of, the drama's happening now. We're having breakups, we're having kisses, we're having all sorts. What have you made of the Islanders this week?
I actually think we're in the heart of a sociological experiment, Adam. We have got a real problem. I don't think it's a problem, but it's fantastic. The men are not lying in there. You know, they're telling the truth. I'm almost scared to say it. And in a way, and I know this is like the Jurassic Park of equality and women's lib and everything in there, but I'm going to have to accept that and kind of still split the sexes slightly. For years, women have been saying, it's not what you're doing, it's the lying. You know, don't lie to me. Whatever you do, don't. I've had people say to me, I didn't mind the cheating. It was the fact that he lied. So now we've got guys that are being honest, and it ain't working out well.
Not going down well, though, is it?
Yeah, you know, it's like, does my bum look big in that? It's still better to say no. And I think with a lot of the guys, you can see them getting drawn into the, tell me what you think of me. Do you like the way I look? Don't worry, I'm very thick-skinned. And then, yeah, you're a 9 out of 10 with room for improvement. And, you know, absolute eruption. So I think, you know, for next year, it needs to be, the men need to learn to be honest, but also only speak if they've got something nice to say.
Totally, and a bit of tact, I think, wouldn't go amiss. But like I said, we have had a lot of drama this week. I'm start actually with one of the couples which I kind of thought was the strongest until last night. Sharon and Aaron are no more. So let's take a look at what happened last night.
Like the person I want to be about, needing to like love kids and really want to start a family.
Okay,
And
no,
that's
so
ideal for me.
if that's what you want, I can't change your mind about that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So yeah, I think everyone had high hopes for Sharon and Aaron, or Aaron, if we can't be, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, completely about you. But I mean, at least she, I think, was definitely blindsided by that last night. How kind of polarizing were their body language signals in that conversation?
I think, I mean, you're right, because they are interesting. They're probably the most intelligent couple of people in there. I think in the real world, I think they probably would stand a good chance. But we'd heard him nitpicking about every little fault that he didn't like in a personality. What was interesting about the way that he did that dumping last night, he waited until he'd obviously drooled all over. Lucinda must be covered in men's drool, quite honestly. You know, they all fancied her. And obviously thinks he's in with a good chance, so he kind of hedged his bets, which she knew, she's not stupid. And then he came along and kind of he sat back in the seat, he splayed, he looked confident, he got his leg crossed high on the other leg. He even put an arm around the back of her chair, which in a way made it look as though he was going to say, oh, look, Lucinda might be lovely, but I like you better. And I think that was probably one of the worst things that he did. The second worst thing that he did was, instead of just saying, look, I actually think I fancy Lucinda more, was to put it on to Sharon's fault. It was what you said the other night, and I didn't like the fact that he doesn't like the fact she doesn't want to have children. I mean, how long have they known one another?
She's also she's like 23 or such. I mean, she's, you know, like, give her a chance. I mean, also, like, yeah, we're having this couple, like, it's as if we need to normalise it's an okay for women. They shouldn't be penalised for not wanting children.
No, or
and to put that on someone it's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot, and the fact that he was using the way that she was a bit feisty, that's not the kind of thing, I'm more chilled. Well, you know, do you want to find an absolutely perfect woman for you that you've made on a sewing machine or something? The thing that worries me is the fact that by criticising her personality, he's demeaned her a bit, and that might affect her behaviour and her confidence in the rest of the show.
And I think, like you say, like he is so chilled out. And if you I think if you looked at that conversation from afar with his arm around her and thing, you would not imagine that he's breaking up with someone.
No.
You know, it was like, it was comforting, if anything.
It was. She could easily have just really snuggled in against him at that point and then heard that news, which would be even worse. And I think that's why with her, fortunately, she went for a poker face. So the close-up that we got, nothing moved on her face. She was obviously a bit suspicious, processing what he was saying. So I think it was probably good for her dignity that we didn't get that initial sort of, oh, he's going to tell me that he really... I mean, if that had been Liberty, I think Liberty would have been expecting Jake to propose at that point, and we'd have watched her poor little face go from, wow, to kind of, oh, I'm being dumped, and that would have been awful. So it was probably good that she kept and sustained the poker face. She just did move away, though, that she distanced herself. So she couldn't have been expecting it, because she would have been at that distance already. There was a movement.
Yeah, no, you could totally tell it was a massive shock for her, I think. And, understandably, I think. It was quite the turnaround. I mean, they hadn't actually talked about the Hugo situation yet. They had said that, they had a difference of opinion on children, but they hadn't really talked about what that meant. So you can totally sympathise, can't you? Really,
you can. And I mean, if the women want to get stuck in with some arguments in there, I'm all for it, because if we're not going to get any romantic action, which it looks like, I mean, unless Lucinda's going to just stay in there by herself with all the guys, at the moment nothing's happening. There's a real sort of dino rod blockage in there at the moment that obviously the producers will be desperately trying to unclog, but I don't think that's going to happen, and therefore they kind of need those dramas. It's like other reality shows traded a lot more on the arguments and the build up to the arguments and the dramas. So they're going to need those to keep the viewers really interested, I think.
I mean, one argument we had this week, which, again, I think for viewers actually and for the Islanders seemed to come out of nowhere, was between Faye, Sharon and Hugo, which is obviously the catalyst between Sharon and Aaron's breakup as well. I think there was probably a bit more to it than what we saw, so we're just going to take a little look at this now.
Aaron, does it start with C and end in hello-y? So I put leggy blonde, not fake.
That word keeps getting thrown around, doesn't it?
What? It's ignorant as fuck.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Who's ignorant?
Pissed me off.
Me.
Such a prick.
So yeah, I mean, even the Islanders had no idea what was going on. Toby was like, "Is it me?" But actually, I think there was tensions boiling long before Hugo said that he wasn't into fakeness. What did you make of that that whole game and the fight that spewed out afterwards?
I think the game was interesting because they were cheating, weren't they? They were warned beforehand, and that's why they kept coming up with all the right answers and everything that would have been impossible to have guessed. And then suddenly it turned serious. I mean, there was an intake of breath that the fire pit should have actually gone out. I mean, it was so dramatic. And the fact that it was Hugo, who's the good guy, allegedly. I think there was a build-up before then, though, because a lot of it was to do with things like they all fancied Chloe, and you could see the more of those boards that came round, you could see that the girls went from sort of, oh, I'll give him permission to fancy, I think you fancy, and then it was Chloe. And it was Chloe's response as well, because she wasn't taking it well in terms of the other girls. She should have stood there and gone, no, not me, something nice and modest and ballsy. But what she was doing was she was rolling her eyes and crouching. And what that was saying to the boys in particular was, oh, the girls are going to hate me for this, which means that she was taking it seriously and they would take it seriously. So that's when it all got very unfunny very quickly. And you could almost see, in a way, Faye go up like a meerkat, nose twitching, that this this. I think she sort of went, "Oh, you'll have to go." She did a jerk with her thumb, it. And with Faye, it's always a joke, but it isn't a joke when she says things like that. So that was the first warning sign, and then obviously they all began to pounce. Again, funnily enough, it was what you would assume to be the two strongest women in there, Sharon and Faye, that took it very personally about Fake. And I thought they were twisting the words at the start. I kind of got it when they discussed it, but I think it was more to do about Chloe than it was to do about that particular. I think their hackles were up and they needed somewhere to focus that on. I think there's also, can I just say, with Hugo, he's the one that, because he's not pulled anybody yet, and he obviously isn't the other guys, all these big builders and everything, and he's not that kind of a guy. I think the girls have kind of taken pity on him a little bit and tried to boost his ego and boost his confidence. And that's the person that, as far as they're concerned, should not come back and bite you on the bum. You should know your place. You should be grateful.
It's interesting with Chloe, though, because we actually touched on it last week, how particularly between her and Faye, there was an underlying tension, which, it hasn't really amounted into a big row or anything yet. And it's not like Faye's scared to speak her mind. So do you think Chloe's actually aware of the tension between her and Faye? But I think you're right, actually, the way she closed up and things, I think she is actually fully aware of the tension between her and the girls, isn't it?
I think, and again, I always say this, but it's about power and status in the group. And I think she and Faye kind of forged something that worked with two queen bees, maybe, and it was working. They always have to get on, though, to a certain extent. If they fall out, then you get warring factions amongst the group. So I think they've kind of kept one another sweet. I think you're right that Faye does speak her mind, but she maybe doesn't do it when people think that she will. I'm often picking up on body language signals from her where she's being very attacking. For instance, when Lucinda and Millie came in, again, she fell back on that mimicry thing. Did you notice that? When she heard, I think it was Lucinda laughing on the date, and then she went into the room with the girls, the makeup room, and really made a big show of it. Yeah. And that's a kind of her way of humiliating that other people might not understand as an attack, perhaps, but it's a very clever attack. And then we see her in the hut where she's sitting there and going, "Oh, it is what it is. It doesn't." But we can see from her body language that when she pretends it's not bothering her, we can see that it absolutely is. But I think she's keeping on the brink of not having a full blasting row.
There was also the kiss with Liam as well, wasn't it? Where she just completely tore into him straight away. Bless him. I think he just didn't really know what to do with himself.
It was from the word go. "Oh, you want to kiss me, do you?" It was like an ice maiden, as though, oh, that's not what she's in there for or something. And I didn't see him doing anything wrong. I don't feel that he arrived showing a big ego. He's a lot younger than she is, etc. But that was the most excruciating kiss. It was like, well, you can if you want to. And then I can't remember her actual words, but when it was finished, oh, was that it then? Was that... It was almost like, do you want to humiliate a man even more? And it was almost, for her, it's like a mating ritual. I mean, just the last scene that we had of them, she was suddenly doing the same technique, but then because he gave her the right answer, she leant across and kind of patted his chest in perhaps the most affectionate display that I've seen. It's almost as though you've got to fight to get through this hard shell and through all the insults, and then if you say the right thing when you do that, I might reward you with a bit of affection. For me, it says more about Faye, as I said all along, probably having some insecurities and bad relationships in the past. It's as though she's expecting the worst from people, which usually means insecurity.
You do kind of get the impression she's always got some sort of guard up all the time, isn't it? And constantly aware of that and presenting that all the time, I hope.
Yeah. And I know I said it to you. She just reminds me of Katie Price. It's that same rather attacking voice and the kind of barriers going up and the slight humiliation of the guys, as though they've got to go through an assault course before they can win her heart.
And Katie Price, you know, is someone who, quite understandably, I think, has her guard up because she's been through the mill with a lot of men, hasn't she? So
Absolutely, and and that's one of the biggest problems in a relationship when you become that cynical. Unfortunately, it means that, I mean, we might be looking at Liberty and thinking, oh, look, poor thing, she just falls in love, opens her heart up. But that's probably the only way to get a loving relationship, by being hurt and allowing yourself to be hurt. Whereas when the guards start to go up, not even the nice guys are going to get through. So, yeah, I'm still rooting for Faye a bit. It'd be
Me
quite
too. I
nice.
hope someone pushes through that barrier. I think that's what it
Yeah.
needs, isn't it? It just needs someone to make her feel secure in her and them. And but I have faith. I have faith in Faye. Next, we're going to take a look. I think this is probably everyone's favourite couple. As if there was any love in Love Island, it felt like it was between these two. But yeah, let's take a look at Toby and Kaz's week.
It's unfair for you.
So what are you doing? Are you standing on the edge or are you jumping in?
I'm jumping heads first, apparently. Yeah, I'm jumping heads first, me. And I'm enjoying getting to know you, like,
Yeah, same.
just chilling with you, like.
I'm quite pleased with myself that you're interested.
Sam, if we start with the speech, Toby's big speech to Kaz this week, it was quite strange because he wasn't giving much away at all and kind of keeping that distance. And I think she had no idea where that was going. I don't think any of us did, actually. And I think there's kind of always a bit of a thing with Toby where he doesn't really know how to be intimate, maybe. I don't know. What did you kind of make of that?
I mean, when I saw that, I found it very touching. It was Toby comes across as a nice guy. You can see that he's working his way through how to handle a relationship, how to get into a relationship, and he's being reasonably honest. Now, the only problem I've got, and you knew I'd have a problem, is the fact that I'm not sure that he is at the stage that we're seeing him presenting at the moment. I think that, I'm going to jump into this relationship. I think he still would prefer to keep his options open. And in a way, Kaz, who's coming across amazingly well, she's just that more experienced, but seems to be, he was sort of, I know that she likes me, and he clearly doesn't know whether to get too sexy in bed. But what worries me is that a lot of that was driven by Jake. Unfortunately, Jake keeps, you go for it, mate, you should. And I don't know why anybody would take relationship advice from Jake. I have got the strongest suspicion that Jake has, Jake had a small chance of being part of a winning couple with Liberty because they got that same nice vibe, as they said, we were like the same person, which is never a good reason to couple up with somebody. And I thought, if they can sustain this, they might just breeze the way through as a kind of traditional winner of Love Island type of couple. But he's clearly not going down that route. But I'm beginning to wonder whether he isn't the biggest pot stirrer in there, because a lot of the advice that he's giving, I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that is probably going to scupper that person's chances or how they're being seen on camera. And I think, if you really wanted to give Toby some advice at the moment, you'd say, all right, don't feel pressured, take your time, be honest with Kaz, she's a smart woman, she'll get it, and then just wait until you absolutely feel right. Don't go in because you've been coached by Jake. So I'm very suspicious of Jake, and I'm not saying it's wrong between Toby and Kaz, but I think it's way too early. And I've got a horrible feeling that we will see them as being a big breakup couple when he meets somebody else.
But absolutely, and I think you can kind of tell from his inexperience that you, I mean, when you have that inexperience, diving in isn't necessarily the best thing to do, is it really? Because you've got a lot of stepping stones to overcome before you kind of get there. And I think he's very susceptible to he's a bit of a yes man, I guess. But I really am a Toby fan. I really like Toby. But I think he's just a bit of a kind of
great things. I like listening to him, but that phrase diving in. I mean, with Kaz, because Kaz has already made up her mind that she wants him. That was diving in the deep end, without a rubber ring on, and I think that will cause longer term problems for Toby. The guys have got to think as well. They're in there for weeks with these people, and if you're not that keen, can you imagine anything worse than the fact that you've committed too early, and then you've got to pretend to like them, maybe get really intimate with them. It's a lot to ask of anybody. I mean, the coupling is a bit like going into a nightclub and saying, "Do you want to dance?" and turning around and seeing the vicar's turned up behind you. It's so unrealistic. And no, I'm a bit worried for Toby because he could end up looking like the bad guy, because we all like Toby, we all like Kaz. But I think if he does try and recouple or meet somebody else, Kaz is going to be very upset. And I think Jake knew that. Maybe I shouldn't be painting him as the villain, but it is a competition. And I think he knows at the moment that none of the girls are interested in it. I mean, he's only with Liberty by default, isn't he, at the moment? I love the way that the girls knock him back, when he was sitting there drooling like the rest of them all over Lucy. So what's your type? He's literally got his legs out on the bed. He's got his crotch on display. He's got his water bottle in the lovely Freudian position. What's your type? And she goes, "I like tall men." And you could almost see the water bottle collapsing.
I think Toby just needs to, I think if he followed his own intuition, actually believed in it, and kind of stopped telling himself, "I'm not experienced, so I need to listen to other people," he'd probably go a lot further in this, I think, wouldn't he? And actually, you're right, with Kim and Kaz would probably go a lot further as well.
Yeah. I mean, he does confide in Kaz, but I think he should have had that conversation he had with Jake. He should have had it with Kaz. "Look, I really like you, but I want to wait until..." Absolutely fine, but not Jake. Don't get nudged, pushed.
And finally, Brad's had quite the week. Brad seems to be falling head over heels with just anyone who walks into the villa.
Yes,
So let's take a look at Brad's week this week.
I had no sexual attraction to any of them. Someone that is more towards my type is now in here that I'm attracted to, and then I can get to know it, and I can actually start my experience. When I seen you, I cancelled that. I says, I can.
Oh my God.
I was like, for the first time, I've literally been like, Jesus Christ, I'd be buzzing to get in the bed with her.
I mean, that could have been two clips from exactly the same date, couldn't it? What's he kind of displaying when he? I just notice his arms are very much quite affirmative, and what do you think he's kind of displaying when he's meeting these girls for the first time, essentially?
I think we're probably looking at Brad being somebody that doesn't have to chat girls up. I mean, he's a very good-looking guy. I think he'd attract girls anyway. He's also made that point about he's looking for a girl that his friends will like, which is slightly worrying, that whoever it is has got to go back and be part of the pack and not even have a personality, because it has to be somebody that will behave like them, which is slightly worrying. I think he's probably new to anything like listening to girls, having a proper conversation with them. They're all complaining, he's not asking me questions, he's not interested, etc. I think he's probably gone out normally, had girls flinging themselves at him, just entertain them with a few stories about himself. And I think maybe he's having to work for it a little bit more for the first time, or maybe analyse, I should be putting in a little bit more effort here. But he seems to have just picked up on that one chat-up line. He clearly thinks it's really good. And in a way, because he's using these big hand gestures, I think he's almost convinced himself as well.
Yeah.
And that would be very likely because he doesn't want to feel guilty about the fact that he's saying to everything that moves or stands still in there for 2 minutes that you're my type, I've never seen, but and it's actually upping a notch with each one, because if you remember with Lucinda, she wasn't just his type. He wanted to get into bed with her straight away. So he's taking it a bit further each time, becoming more emphatic. I think he realises that he needs to do a bit of convincing with the gesticulation. But, that over-congruent gesticulation, to anybody watching it would know that he's exaggerating, that he's not particularly telling the truth. But it's as though he's persuading himself with it more than anybody else. And has he not got the thought that there's a lot of us watching him and thinking, hang on a minute, you said that there and there. I think that it may be why he's adding a bit to it each time, so that in his mind he can say, yeah, but the first one I thought was quite my type, the second one was really my type, the next one was really my type, and I wanted to get to bed. So he's probably adding in those different steps so that he can not feel so guilty, or maybe looks guilty about what he's doing. But it's pretty obvious. Be interesting to see if it's worked with Lucinda and Millie. Yeah.
Well, it'd be what happens when the next girl walks in, isn't it? And the promises are getting bigger, and I don't know. I feel like the gesture, even the physical gestures, are getting bigger every time, isn't it? It's kind of like how much bigger can you go?
Yeah, because he's obviously part of his brain is aware that I think I might have said this before, so I better make it even bigger. And I mean, please send in an absolute drop dead gorgeous girl. And he'll go off like a windmill, and I don't know, he'll be like, yeah, I want to marry you. You know, I mean, I've never seen anybody I wanted to marry before. It's quite funny, but unfortunately, I think a lot of the girls are seeing him as still being quite sweet. And he's got, I said last week, he's got that kind of boyish smile and the blue eyes that I think a lot of the girls felt that he's very good looking, but very sort of controllable in a way, but he's a wild card for sure. I mean, it would be really funny if they had one of those tasks that they used to do on Big Brother, where they play back footage to and watch all the girls watching him say the same thing. Would be hilarious.
Maybe they will, if you're watching.
Not to the producers, please don't. Although probably, he'd probably get away with it. Actually, he's probably still the
he's
most
quite charming, isn't he?
Yeah.
Do you think there's like you said, like he's probably, I mean, I don't know, but I'm imagining he's not used to kind of having to put in this much work, maybe. Do you think there's like an agitation from him when he's talking to the girls, a kind of, just like, why do I have to work this hard? There's something quite, I don't know, uncomfortable about him, I think, when he's doing it.
There is, I mean, in a way, he's learning skills, or trying to learn skills in there that maybe he should have learnt when he was about 17. Basic skills like ask questions, listen to the answers, find out about the girl that you're speaking to. And I think he's just taken this huge leap, and he's still making a similar mistake that a young teenage boy would make. If you watch a younger, much younger person, girl or boy, making things up, maybe they always tend to over gesticulate. It's a kind of non-verbal diarrhea technique. It's a bit like they'll add in too many details as well. If you're not just, I wasn't very well, I was being sick and I had to go to the doctor. So the whole story gets bigger and bigger, and with him, that's what's coming over in the gestures. But he should have learnt those skills a long time ago. It might also be, Adam, though, that he meets a lot of women in nightclubs and the music's very loud, so he just looks great and waves his arms a lot. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, he hasn't done that for a while, though, so...
Right. Old skills.
Old skills, yeah. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much, Judy. Loads of really interesting nuggets there. But we're going to be back next week when, I'm sure, again, it's going to be a completely different ball game. All those couples we've just talked about will be over. There'll be new couples. Who knows? Who knows what will happen? But yeah, join us next week for another episode of Love or Lie Island.